I would like now to call Brent back to the stage. As chair of your board of directors, I can attest to the commitment of President and CEO Brent Ridge to Dairyland's members. Since joining Dairyland nearly 4 years ago, he has been an innovative leader, shared many ideas to ensure that Dairyland evolves as our industry and consumers change. I now ask Brent to share his keynote address with the highlights of today's annual meeting, Powering Possibility.
Thank you, Jenny, and good morning. Appreciate everybody's attendance. And I do need to clean up an error I made. So for those of you that thought I was perfect, I am not. So during my intro remarks, I failed to recognize Bayfield Electric Co-op. I was reminded by a number of staffers that occurred. And there's a couple of consequences of this. So first, I believe it's going to cost me a very expensive dinner that I will not be able to expense. I hear applause from Bayfield, so that's good. That's good. So again, I do want to acknowledge Bayfield, Barry, and Chris, but I want to do something a little bit different. I want everybody to stand up and give them a standing ovation. Everybody stand up. I'm sure that ovation is going to cost me another dinner. So thank you. Good to get up and stretch a little bit too. So again, apologies for that. Great relationship with Bayfield, doing a lot of innovative things up there. Been very supportive of our work in Superior with NTEC. So again, thank you for all you do at Bayfield. So I do want to kind of go through our mission and vision, and of course cooperative principles. What I'm going to talk about today from a vision perspective is about value and the value we provide during this navigation of sort of a windy road to the future. Service territory from a member perspective is staying stable, but when you look at growth outside of the service territory, it's really been remarkable, and it's remarkable for a couple of things. It's strong membership driving municipal growth because many of our members are driving the municipal growth. We have some municipals that don't operate through our distribution co-ops, but that's changing, and we want to do more and more of that partnership. You'll continue to see this grow. We went from 17 to 27 municipals as we turned the year over last year. And it's important for a couple of things. It's important for, of course, just revenue growth that spreads our overall costs over a larger base. But it also represents other areas of growth, opportunities for economic development. And these are great partnership as we go forward. So this map will be changing. It'll be morphing. It'll be showing different generating resources as we go forward as well. Also want to provide some thanks and gratitude. So first, kind of focusing on today, I want to thank the Lacrosse Center and the AV team that has put all this together. And of course, the Dairyland team that is a list of many, many people. It's, Abby, Jason, Joyce, Kelsey, Courtney, Patty. I missed a dozen, I'm sure. But let's give those folks a round of applause. Of course, I'm grateful for you, the members. I'm grateful for all the teammates at Dairyland that you've had a chance to interact with today. Of course, the Dairyland Managers Association, providing good insight, great advice. I want to thank Brian Cranby for his leadership over the last year, and I want to thank Craig Burrows for his upcoming leadership that is as the incoming president of the DMA. And of course, the Dairyland Board. They provide tremendous support for our mission, the resources we need to be successful. And I think fundamentally for us, when I go through our issues and challenges and opportunities, you'll see a mark of a board that has a really strong strategic focus. And a strategic focus on the mission, safe, reliable, and affordable electricity with a vision to provide value. And that will come through today, and I want to thank the board for all they've done. So let's take an opportunity to give our board one more round of applause. So I'm going to go through a couple of steps today. I'm going to talk about what our future could look like. And you can see in this graphic, you can see a windy road leading to a horizon that as you can see, includes various different power plants: solar, wind, hydro, fossil fuel, maybe nuclear. A robust transmission system, all feeding loads that are diverse, whether they're rural or even suburban in some cases, and maybe urban in other cases. So with that backdrop, I want to do a little discussion about what is the current state of play, and this is really all about the energy transition. This is about moving from a fossil fuel-based utility to being less fossil fuel focused and more renewable focused. But I always like to establish what's the state of play and what's the mountain we're trying to climb. So this first graph shows winter, and it's an actual winter week in January. And you can see that we had really strong wind, really strong solar because it was a clear day, very clear week, very windy. But you can see in the lavender section, over 80% of the needed energy to keep the lights on came from fossil fuel and from nuclear. And this is across the entire MISO system. So that's winter. That's quite a hill to climb. And then this is what summer looks like. So less wind, a little bit more solar, it lasted a little bit longer, but much higher peaks because of the increasing summer loads. And on each of these days, including the day that was an emergency alert for MISO, we were relying on well over 80% of our energy coming from fossil fuels and nuclear. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're addressing the issue and what our plans are going forward. So part of this is complicated with the continual closures of coal plants. Recent EPA rule is going to make the coal plants close even sooner. And you'll see on this map, Genoa 3 is on that list as having been closed and demolished. We now have Weston 4 and JPM. And we have a partner at Weston that has primary control over the future of Weston. So this makes the issue even more complicated in terms of filling that lavender gap with renewables and other baseload sources. So the other issues and challenges are in some ways national and global for us. Natural gas prices, it's a global market, and so we have to be mindful of what's going on across the world. Other issues like coal supply, train supply, and then the pipelines for fossil fuel like gas, those are national issues. And then of course transmission is absolutely critical. And here we have MISO, NERC, and the MRO, the Midwest Reliability Organization, talking about the increased risk for blackouts, brownouts, rolling blackouts. So it is a real concern. And our job as utilities are to keep the lights on for our folks when they're most needed. Now, kind of painted a sober picture, but there's a plan, there's a strategy, and I think it's one that works. So we start with our premise. Our premise is being sustainable. That helps our mission, that drives our vision. So there's 4 key components to sustainability. That's delivering safe, reliable, and predictable electricity. That's about power plant reliability and diversity. We've got to be cost effective. We also need to lower our carbon output, but we need to do it without negatively impacting safety and reliability. And there's a word up here, sacrificing safety and reliability. I don't think there is a way that you ever think you can minimize it. If we ever give up on being safe and reliable, we are sacrificing our mission. And of course, everything we do are with the people we have, our innovation, our growth, our transition to renewables. That's all driven by people. People in this room, people at the power plants, and in a lot of ways, legislators. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So again, I painted a picture of a challenge, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to address that challenge. And so for us, it's all the above. We are not going to be the 98% coal utility we were in 1999. We're not that today, and we're not going to be that in the future. So there's lots of options out there, and I'll talk about many of them. We have our existing fleet of fossil fuel plants that we really have to cherish for the near term on some and for the long term for others. We have to embrace federal grants like New ERA, which I'll talk about. We have to look at near-term PPAs, power purchase agreements, And we have to look at leveraging New Era if that comes to pass for us in growing our renewable footprint. So our plan really can lay out in 3 steps. So we're in the middle of completing our baseload and dispatchable transformation. We closed G3. It was an expensive old plant, and we purchased RockGen. We traded about 350 megawatts of coal for about 500 megawatts of natural gas. That purchase has proven to be phenomenally beneficial for our members. We're developing future power supply options. That could be NTEC. That could be power purchase agreements. That could be New Era. We've got to assess our current market risk and where we find value in the market and how we deal with regulatory risks. Think about the EPA rule that could direct the closure of all coal plants by 2032. We're also looking at adding renewable resources. New Era grants from the U.S. Department of Agriculture are going to be critical for that. And then looking at continually dealing with supply chain issues and inflation risk. And then the far horizon is what does that next base load looks like? Because until we see significant technology improvements in storage, there needs to be a 24/7 base load resource that is not carbon emitting. That option right now is hydro, pumped hydro, and nuclear. And so we're studying nuclear. We're starting that discussion. We started it 2 years ago. We're ahead of the curve, but we have to have the discussion today, tomorrow, and the next day to be ready for the future. So here's what we've looked like over the years. So in '99, I mentioned we were a 98% coal utility, down to 70% in 2019 and 2029. About a third and a third and a third, with coal being our lowest output. But New Era will transform that if we're fortunate enough to get those grants, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Renewable generation, critically important to us. If you add these numbers up for the plants that are running, the Badger State Solar is not operational, but there's about 350 megawatts of renewable on here already in a system that has a peak load of about 1,200. What's interesting, I talked about there being 350 megawatts on this page. Really can count on somewhere between 120 and 200 throughout a day where there's a lot of wind and a lot of sun. So again, when we talk about nameplate capacity, we're not talking about the capacity that it can deliver. And those are always available plants. So again, remember, our solution here is all the above. Renewables are critically important. Our always available resources are also critically important as well. I've talked about nuclear. We're going to be seeing a changing and transforming power plant portfolio. Going to be more renewables, less fossil fuel, but yet we see electrification coming. And that beneficial electrification can take many, many different faces. So renewables great, but we need to have something that is base load and available 24/7. Nuclear's that hits that mark. And we're going to be doing a lot of studying, a lot of communicating on this, because we need to be prepared for when we move into really the new nuclear renaissance. We need to be on the leading edge of that. And one of the ways will be through government support. So we have a number of executives and key personnel working on that going forward. So again, each annual report will provide an update. We talk about it about every other board meeting. And as I roll out and meet with your boards, that'll be a topic as well if you'd like to learn more about it. I've mentioned grants 2 or 3 times already, and I'll talk about some of the things we're doing already. So we've seen $15 million in grants regarding middle mile, and we're working with many of your utilities to deploy that grant. And what that has essentially done is taken our overall strategy that we had in place and funded through our long-range plan. It covered some of those costs and accelerated the deployment in a way that we couldn't have done without the federal support. We've also worked with many of your utilities and submitted, whether they be, the old name is earmarks, I forget what it's called today, earmarks or other grants, and you can see the projects with Price, Jump River, and Jackson, all providing storage study opportunities going forward. And then we've also supported the installation of 160 EV chargers. And New Era, this is an interesting opportunity for us. This is almost $10 billion fund created by the Biden administration and sent through the U.S. Department of Ag and Rural Utility Service to kickstart generation and transmission utilities on their journey towards renewable transition. So it's an incredible opportunity for us. We announced a few weeks ago that we moved from the letter of interest phase where we put over $900 million on the table as potential grants. We moved from that stage to the award stage. We submitted our award grant last week. Great effort by the team, and I think one that will pay dividends for us. If we're successful in the award, and there's nothing guaranteed, it's a very competitive process, it has a potential of growing our nameplate capacity of our renewables to 1,000, and that's 1,000 additional. So where I talked about 350 megawatts of nameplate renewables, we'd have over 1,300. And that's a phenomenal transition for us. It really helps us on the energy side, and with the grant funding, it'll help us on a cost side, and I'll show you that in a bit. But we're going to have solar, wind, and storage projects in Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, and North Dakota, all part of this strategy. And so when you think about the challenges of power supply I talked about in the beginning, this will allow us to rapidly add a lot of energy to the system to support operations of our system. Now, we have a capacity challenge, and that's what RockGen, JPM, and Weston are dealing with. And that's what nuclear will deal with. So this is not the end-all, be-all solution, but it's a big piece of the puzzle. What New Era will do, it will lower our carbon footprint significantly. Instead of having a 50% target reduction in 2030, we'll be 77. That will make us look, if not like, better than investor-owned utilities. It will also save money. $135 million of savings on our projected rates over a 15-year period. So when you think about the challenges of providing safe, reliable, and affordable energy, New Era is a good fit. We had in our overall vision putting in 800 megawatts of renewables before 2030. This gives us a boost in terms of how much we're adding, and it gives us significant financial benefit. I mentioned broadband. This was part of the grant that I mentioned before, but you can see a White House-based rollout that we had at the office. And then, of course, we have to continue to work with policymakers locally and federally. So when you think about the challenge, one of the challenges is regulatory, the EPA rule. Let's just kind of put that kind of in a big box for us. That really impacts JPM. So that takes 350 megawatts of baseload energy away from us. So we'll be dealing with policymakers and the court systems to work through that to give us that flexibility. But again, New Era, adding renewables, having RockGen, having some properly placed power purchase agreements will help fill that gap. The other thing we're focused on as part of the solution is transmission. If we don't have a good transmission system, there is not going to be an energy transition. And I'm pleased to announce this week, we announced that the in-service date for the entire Cardinal Hickory Creek project will now be September 27th, 2024. And I had an opportunity to meet a former Dairyland board member this morning. Dan Fisher, where are you? So he talked about being on the Dairyland board a decade ago, talking about, if not approving this project. Well, guess what? This is great news. It's been a battle for almost a decade. And we're at the end of the road here, and I'm excited to bring in all the renewable energy from Iowa through this system. Been very, very challenging in my 4 years, 6 years before that. So this is very, very good news. But it underscores a bigger issue. When we're bringing in 1,000 megawatts of renewables, that's just us, and then there's maybe thousands upon thousands of more. How do we transmit that to the load? And so without meaningful permit reform, that's going to be a challenge too. But we're focused on a new-looking portfolio that provides safe, reliable, and cost-effective electricity. We're also focused on having a robust transmission system that allows us to deliver that energy when needed, and where needed. And again, all this happens with our people. And so just to kind of wrap up the challenge in terms of navigating the future, when I think about it, we're in the middle of a transition of our portfolio. We're moving to less coal, more renewables, but we're doing it in a patient way. We're focusing on investing in our transmission system that will build reliability and build a cleaner transportation system for our energy. And all this is being done by people. And you can see on this slide, you can see all the engagement our people have with our system, with each other, and with leadership. As I transition away from really the mission and vision, I want to talk about two folks that were incredibly important to our mission and vision in setting the standards. So we have two retirees. Deb, after 36 years, she retired earlier this year. John Carr, after 16 years, he'll retire. And a lot about what I talked about today in terms of our transition, these two folks had a big part of. I want to first recognize Deb. And being at this meeting makes me think about the mark she left on Dairyland in her 36 years. So I spoke to her earlier today, and I said, when was your first annual meeting? 1988, so she did advise me that she did start at 12 years old, and that the labor laws were different back then, so the child labor laws. So she was here, and she was taking, I'm sure it wasn't in this room, but somewhere else, but she was taking pictures. And that was one of her first jobs at Dairyland. And over that time, as you sit in this room with this great technology, the great facility, the great program, the great messaging, the transparency, Deb has been involved in that for 3.5 decades. And so her imprint on Dairyland will be lasting, and we're seeing it today with a highly professional annual meeting, great communication, great member relations, and really, Deb, stand up. I'd like everybody to acknowledge you. Where are you at? There you go. And so, John Carr, you're in the front row, right? All right, so John's left a mark on Dairyland as well. And it's one that we talk about a lot. And we may not realize who drives certain things that come to fruition. So one of the most important things we've done in the last 4 years is the purchase of RockJet. And that was one of the first things John had a chance to work on when I got here. And it was an interesting process where we had a willing seller, we had them ready to roll, then all of a sudden the market started to switch around and we had an unwilling seller, but we had a lot of agreements in place that kept them at the bargaining table. And John Carr and his team battled and fought and negotiated and landed that deal. And today it is a remarkable both equity and reliability product for Dairyland. So that's a mark. I talked about New Era. He's been a key driver in the New Era application. And these are just two things in the last 3 years that John's been involved in. He's been involved in the transformation of our power marketing and our power supply, the closure of G3, working through that very difficult decision. So John and Deb, John, stand up. Thank you for your service and the mark you've left on Dairyland. Also like to recognize our first annual Cooperative Day of Service and the upcoming second annual Cooperative Day of Service. You saw the video that talked about that, one of the areas we were in My Energy. You'll see the next 6 coming up this year, and there'll be 6 more next year and 6 more after that. Just amazing participation across our system, and it's really about cooperative purpose and concern for community. And I've never seen it more on display than during those days. We've also started a program, again, another mark on Dairyland that Deb has left is not just the Cooperative Day of Service, but the contributions program. That's been going for a while, of course. But this year, last year, and going forward, we're going to endeavor to have 24 sponsored items partnering with each of our co-ops. Again, making an incredible difference in the communities that we serve with you. And I'll close with safety. I started with safety this morning, and I'll close with safety. Here you see several of our coworkers walking through a field out in the middle of nowhere, walking to a truck, probably doing some work with a storm coming in that you can see in the foreground, or in the background, excuse me. And this is what people do every day. And we've talked about storms in the past. We've talked about the work that all your crews do and do safely. These folks, not just here, but at the power plants, in the service center, we do dangerous jobs. They do dangerous jobs. And I'm proud of what we've done from a safety performance perspective. We're driving safety performance in the right direction. We've got a long ways to go, but we're going to do it through ownership, accountability, and really concern for our teammates, care for our community. So I'm proud of our entire team for the work they've done there. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance. Appreciate the team and all that they've done. I'd now like to introduce Executive Vice President